Morning. Hello. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Pardon?
Good,
I
good,
thought
good.
your mic dropped out for a second. I was like, oh no, but no,
No.
good, perfect.
That would happen as soon as we go live, wouldn't it? The mic would die or something. And
It would.
Yeah.
It would.
Yeah.
I love how it's so funny. There's this meme about it, but like how we come on stage and it's like we didn't talk yesterday about what we're going to talk about today.
Oh no, that didn't
15
happen
minutes
at all.
prior.
No.
I haven't seen you for a month,
No.
basically.
Actually, you have, because we were going to say accountex.
We were. If any people that are currently sitting here, if you went to Accountex, pop a wave down in the chat. How did you find Accountex, David?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm a very literal person, and so when you say to me, how did I find it? I'm like, well, I went on a train and then I got off the train, and but yeah, it was good. It was great. The worst part of it, of course, is having to speak yourself. And you're like, I was on 2:00 on day 2. So the whole of day 1 and the morning of day 2, I'm like, oh, these other speakers, gosh, look at that guy. He's got fantastic slides and I haven't got hardly any slides at all. And this guy's really holding the attention of the room and he's a really good speaker. And I'm like, I just stand up and burble. And this one's packed out and that people are standing at the side of the room. And nobody will turn up to mine and I'll be awful and I won't know what to say. And because when I first started doing speaking and training, I was doing training sessions on AML, and there's a lot of detail that you have to cover.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, the only way I'm going to do this is to actually write out on the slides all the points in sentences, in words. So basically, I stood up for 2 hours and read my slides to people. And, I must apologize to all those people who were permanently scarred by having me read slides to them for 2 hours about money laundering compliance and regulations and things, because it's just awful. And now I have like a couple of slides on with a few words. In fact, my best slide of all, the one that got the best reaction.
Yeah.
You know what I'm going to say, don't you?
I know exactly what you're going to say. Yeah, I know exactly.
It was a totally blank slide. It was just like an empty screen. And
it's not the slide I thought, actually, but no, that was a good slide too. Yeah, your blank slide, like all the things that you love about AML. It's like, here you go.
Yeah, I've made this slide of all the things you really like about AML, and here it is, and then just show a blank slide. And when I was setting up, the technician guy said, oh my goodness, you've got a dead slide there. Don't worry, I'll take that out quick. And I'm like, no. That's my best slide. that's empty slide. So yeah, so I suppose perhaps I've learned a bit over the years about presenting, because it can be death by PowerPoint, can't it? And this with you is just a breeze, because we just chat about anything and nothing for the best part of an hour. And people say, oh, that was great. I learned so much. And I'm thinking, really? What?
Yeah. And I've been thinking as well, like, it'd be cool for at some point next year if, like, if we were invited, or just put it out into the universe, but like you and I invited to sit on stage somewhere and just like have a cup of coffee and just start yapping, really, like we do here. I think that would translate really well to in person.
I ought to confess that what an awful, dreadful person I am, aren't I? Because like 5 minutes before I went on, and you were at the back, I said, oh, Sophie, I'll ask you to come up and join me. Like,
I got pulled on stage.
Yeah.
No, but thank you for that. That was very kind of you to share your stage with me, David. I appreciate it. But yeah, something that was really cool is, the chairman of Firmcheck is called Hamish Edwards, who was a co-founder of Xero. And him and I were sat in the back of your talk, and it's all very serious. We're talking about you're talking about the accountancy bodies and the serious fines, but for whatever reason, the way that you sometimes talk really hits the Kiwi humor. So you'll say something really serious, and then Hamish is in the back going, ha ha ha, everyone's like, oh, what? Like, how are you finding this funny? But some of the way you say things, it is lighthearted and it does translate really well. So no, it's a really good talk as always, and you had standing room and people engaged, and yeah, it was really good, David. And it was nice for you to hang out with the Firmcheck team as well and meet more of us. And it's not just me. It's not just me that exists at Firmcheck. It's a whole team.
I put a photo on LinkedIn, as you know, and you put a comment, that woman has a big head. There was like the woman's head taking up like a quarter of the screen.
A third of the picture is the back of my head.
And I thought people won't realize that Sophie knows that's her own head. They'll think she's just slagging off some poor woman in the audience for having a big head. So I thought I've got to add a comment to make it clear that this is actually Sophie's head that she's complaining about. But yes.
No, again, the Kiwi humor sometimes doesn't translate. No, that's perfect. Okay, well, welcome everybody who's kind of starting to walk in, it kind of feels like, or take a sit at the table. This is the third month David and I have run this AMA session. So, and some of you have been here before. Again, for those who've been here before, feel free to put a little wave in the chat. It's nice to see you again. And the kind of format is, when you signed up, you were asked to submit a question. And if you didn't, but something's come up since, you can pop it in the chat to the right-hand side of the screen. But we just kind of
panic completely if you do that, but just do it anyway.
Well, you gotta test. Well, you're the expert, David, so we've got to test you sometimes. But we'll run in and start riffraffing off the questions that were pre-submitted, I reckon. Does it sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Now, I've got a list and you've got a list, and hopefully it's the same list.
I do, but I feel really funny. So obviously I work for a software company. I work for Firmcheck, but I've written all the questions down on a piece of paper. My iPad died, so I needed to put it on a piece of paper. Cool. So I'll start off with the source of funds check.
Okay.
The source of funds question. So that was, how can you reliably assess the source of prospects' source of funds?
Yeah. And when you mention prospects, one thing that immediately springs to mind, which is, dare I say, a little bit daft about the money laundering regs. But the money laundering regs require you to do your AML, your client due diligence and all that sort of stuff before you start work for the client.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the logic for that you shouldn't be working for somebody if you haven't done a risk assessment and so on. But the truth, particularly for accountants, is that you get to know the client and their financial affairs over a period of time. So the sensible time, if you like, to do the money laundering risk assessment would be like 12 months after the start, but you're not allowed to do that. So what you have to do is kind of update it annually as you learn more about the client. But so that was triggered by the word prospects, because you're talking to people and you don't know their financial history, and it is a bit difficult to say to a potential client, before I decide I'm going to take you on, I need to know your financial history and so on. The way I'm supposed to dress it up is so that I can best help you. I need to understand where you're coming from financially, and also actually where you want to go to. What are your plans for your business? What do you want to achieve? How can I best help you to achieve what you want? And that's not an AML point. That's a general onboarding point, a marketing point, if you like. Talk to clients about what they actually want. But let me just look again at the question. How do you reliably assess the source of a client's or a prospect's source of funds? Yeah. I tend to think in terms of source of funds as important. I was going to say important where there is a source of funds, where the client is introducing some significant money into the business, then I think you need to ask some questions about where that money's come from. One of the issues for accountants is that they think to themselves, well, this client, maybe he's just bought a business property, a factory or something, and he's put in £300,000, let's say, to buy that factory. When he went to a solicitor for conveyancing, the solicitor will, one assumes, because they're covered by AML as well, will have asked, what's the source of funds? Can you evidence that? Can I see some bank statements or something to show where this money's come from? Certainly, when I recently bought a house, I went to the solicitor, and with my wife as well, because she's a retired solicitor and she was buying the house with me. And the solicitor said to me, "What's the source of funds?" And I said, "Well, my mother died and left me some money, and I've earned some money from doing this, and then some money came from that." And Janice starts kicking me under the table. Shut up. Because the more I mentioned different sources of funds, the more I was creating work for the solicitor to get all this documented. And I was just causing myself and the solicitor tons of hassle by mentioning all these different sources of funds. But that's how life is, particularly when you get to my age. You've got a bit of money came from this and a bit of money came from that. So the point I was getting to is, when that same person who's just bought the factory for £300,000 goes to their accountant and says, "I want to set up a limited company. I've just bought a factory for £300,000. And the accountant says, "Right, I need to check the source of funds." You can imagine the client thinking, "Oh, grief, I've just been through all this with the solicitor, and now I've got to do it all again with the accountant." And some accountants I know will say, "Look, you've done this, you've to a conveyancing solicitor, right? They will have sorted your source of funds. I don't need to ask." Unfortunately, that's not the right answer for the AML regs. And part of the reason that's not the right answer is that the accountant will know a lot about the client's tax affairs, for example, and income tax returns, that the solicitor won't know. So if the client has tax returns which are inconsistent with that purchase, one case I'm dealing with at the moment, guy's on universal credit and he buys 3 houses. Well, you're not supposed to be on universal credit if you've got more than, I think it's about £16,000 of assets.
Oh, okay.
And he buys 3 houses without any mortgages. So something is sadly wrong here. Yeah. Something is not right. But the solicitor wouldn't know that. The solicitor wouldn't know what's on his tax returns. The solicitor wouldn't know perhaps that he's claiming universal credit and so on. And the accountant does. So unfortunately, it's not actually good enough just to say, "Oh, well, the solicitor will have done that. I needn't bother." You actually do have to do it yourself, and you have to view it with your own knowledge of the guy's tax history and accounts history and so on and so on. But hey, so have I answered the question? How do you reliably assess it? Well, you have to ask. It depends what the source of funds is. As I said, in my case, some of the money had come. My mother had died. She'd left me some money. So there's probate documents. There's a solicitor dealt with her estate. There's an account that they send me at the end where it sets out these are assets. These are the legacies. This is how the residue was split. This is the amount, David Winch, that you're entitled to. So I produced that, and that works. But it just depends what the source is. Where it can be a bit difficult is if you've got somebody, say, who lives overseas, who's buying a property in the UK, because that happens, and they need a UK accountant because the property is going to be, say, a buy-to-let property, and they'll have UK rental income, and they need to deal with HMRC and so on and so on. Then it's a bit difficult if somebody says, right, well, I live in Spain or Italy or France or Germany or wherever, and I've got money there, and I'm bringing that money over. And you're thinking, right, how do I verify that?
Yeah.
And again, I suppose you're going to be asking for bank statements. You're going to be asking, you might even say, do you have an accountant in your home country who can tell me all this is legit and so on?
I think that's like time and time again with our AMAs, like when we get these sorts of questions, often the answer, and you've described in great detail, but often the answer is, well, it's just simply to ask. I don't mean to like simplify, but sometimes it's just that asking is what's required, and then looking at what you're given. I think within Firmcheck, like when you're going through the onboarding process with a new prospect or renewing your CDD, there is a field that says, like it just says, it's not descriptive enough today, but it says source of wealth, source of funds, and then you tick, that you've collected that information. I suppose a run-on question is, capturing source of funds and source of wealth required by all prospects and all clients, or is it something that you do when you determine someone is a higher level of money laundering risk?
I would say it's something I would do when I think there is a source of wealth. So if some guy off the street says, right, I'm going to set up as a plumber, I've got a few tools, I've got a bit of a van that I bought for 500 quid, it still goes, then there are no funds being introduced, so there's no problem. Case I was looking at yesterday, a guy introduced £300,000 into his company.
Okay.
Well, yeah. So where from? Who? Yeah. What? Why? How did that happen? Now there's answers to those questions, but where there is like that sort of thing going on, then yes, source of funds. And in relation to a business generally, if you have got, particularly on a cash-based business, if you've got the proprietor introducing funds all the time, introducing cash all the time, the risk is that cash is derived from undeclared sales. So you've got to, as an accountant, you've got to have a discussion with him and say, look, where does all this cash keep coming from? And hopefully he'll say something that's sensible. I do see, I mean, sorry, I'm talking a lot, but I do see on the criminal side, a problem happens where somebody's in business and they have produced their business bank statements to the accountant, and the accountant's prepared the business accounts, everything's absolutely fine. And then it comes out that in their personal bank account, there's a whole load of bankings which are either cash or clearly business trading bankings, which have not been declared, which have not been put to the business, and then there is a problem. And the accountant just looks a bit stupid because he's never asked for the personal bank statements. And if he had seen them, it would take him about 10 seconds to realize that there's something seriously wrong here. But there you go.
Okay, cool. So from what I understand then, it's just you going, okay, so they have a lot of money, say, like they have a source of wealth, they have an amount of cash, and you're verifying where that cash has come from, so that if that cash is to flow into their business or the books that you're looking after or whatever have you, then it's like you've already verified that, yeah, that is about correct. Like, you know your customer or you know your client, and that, yeah, they already have that amount of wealth. versus if you don't do that and then all of a sudden they put £300,000, which would be lovely to have, but £300,000 randomly into their business, then that's kind of a red flag, right? Where did you get that money? How did you obtain it? How long have you had it? Source of wealth is, just kind of going, it's knowing their, what would you call it, money profile, their wealth profile before.
Yeah, the sort of financial history and profile. I mean, it might be the case that somebody sold a property or sold a previous business or something like that, and it's all absolutely legit, and you can just say, oh, yeah, seen that, happy, done.
Okay.
Also, I tend to use the word cash, Sophie, to mean folding money.
Yeah.
And accountants use it to mean money, including bank balances. And I think we have to be careful what we're talking about. Obviously, if somebody turns up literally with £300,000 in cash, in £50 notes, that's
wild. It's wild.
That does some of my clients, but there you go.
So I suppose the answer really is like with anything that you need to ask the question of, sometimes the answer, like you can't do it reliably, but you've got to use your own better judgment and just ask the question. It's just asking the question. And if they lie to you, they lie to you. But you've asked the question and you've tried.
And you document that you answer.
That's what's important.
And a lot of it is common sense.
Yeah.
You've got to move me on to the next question because I'm going to rabbit on for an hour.
I'm just source of funds and source of wealth, like for the Firmcheck side, like the volume of people who go, what's this, is really interesting. So it is a topic that warrants a 15-minute, divulging. So no, it's well worth the time. I suppose
it's kind of more important usually for solicitors than accountants.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Hopefully an easy question. I'm a one-man band. Can I confirm, do I need an official MLRO designate or MLRO policy? So in previous AMAs, we've kind of discussed the roles of people in firms and who does AML and who looks after AML. So this was just a rehashing just to make sure that we're very clear on the role of an MLRO in a firm. Yeah.
And now trade secrets, we did discuss this yesterday, you and me, and I thought, before the session, I'll just recheck what it actually says in the money laundering regs. And of course I haven't. So my fault. But what I'm going to say is the money laundering regulations do have an exception for a one-man band. And by a one-man band, I mean somebody who doesn't have any accounting staff at all. Maybe a secretary or a receptionist or something, but nobody who does accounts and stuff. Literally, there is just you. And the exception is that you do not have to appoint a money laundering reporting officer, which sounds fantastic. But actually, it's just obvious. You are the money laundering reporting officer because there's only you there. So, it's you. So you don't have to go through the process of saying, I am going to appoint myself to the money laundering reporting officer.
Yeah. Or hire someone. That's not what we're saying either, right?
No, you don't have to, you don't have to get somebody in. You just do it. In terms of policies and procedures, very often you see in a template of a policies and procedures document something that will say something like, the MLRO will report annually to the board on the process of money laundering and the compliance. And you don't have to do that either because you are the board. But so you don't put that in, but everything else does apply. So you still need to do your CDD, of course, and your risk assessments. You still need to have a firm-wide risk assessment document. You still need to have money laundering policies, controls and procedures document. It's just that is slightly different in terms of reporting. But the reality is that it is very little different, because of the need, for example, to document everything that you do, even to the extent of documenting internal suspicious activity reports. What you will do in practice is probably fill in a document that looks very much like an internal suspicious activity report, and send it to yourself, and then decide whether to make a report to the National Crime Agency and do that. So basically, everything that you have to do in a larger practice, or a slightly larger practice, let's say, you have to do as a one-man band. With the exception that you don't actually have to call yourself the MLRO. But then your supervisory body will probably say to you, who is the person responsible for your money laundering compliance? And you'll say, me. And so you're the MLRO. So,
I'm so sorry. You can't hear the yelling over my mic, can you? A little bit?
I can hear a little in the background, but
okay, I might close the windows. I live next to a school.
Right, okay.
On the weekends, but like when I'm sat here, I've left the windows open because it's rocking hot.
A bit warmer.
So apologies for the background sound. But it is basically like what we said yesterday when we hashed out the conversation, was just basically who's submitting the SAR, if there was one. If it's you, then you're the one that has the MLRO responsibilities, and whether or not you've decided that or not, that's just who it is really within the firm. Perfect. Oh, okay, cool. Emily, Russian connection. Oh, okay, we'll just leave.
Don't go there.
I haven't even read it yet. I don't know if I want to read it.
I think we should eject Emily from this discussion immediately.
No, not at all. If it's Emily, I know I've got a meeting with her soon, so I'm looking forward to meeting her in person. I thought originally she's the same last name as you. It was your daughter who was just like missing her dad.
It's the daughter I never knew I had in that case, because I don't know at all. But okay.
I'll bring this one up from Carolyn. So she has a client that's had a change of directorship, but uncertain if she's still going to be looking after this client. Does she need to do CDD on this new director, even though it's not showing in company's house yet? Or should she just leave it, since she's kind of already leaving anyway? And I'll just close this window while you answer, David. Sorry.
Right. And you're saying I will know by the end of the month. Okay. Probably the textbook would say, oh yes, you have to do everything. But let's try and be practical rather than sound like a regurgitation of a textbook, and say what are you actually going to do. I suspect you are probably going to wait and see what happens a little bit. If it's the case that you don't actually have to do any work until the end of the month, and by that time you know, then my tendency would be, let's just wait and see, because they're not really a client yet. As I say, that's not the textbook answer, and I know a lot of advisors would say, oh yeah, you've just got to do it straight away. So let me just look at the question again. I've had a client who's had a change of directorship, and I may be losing the job as they're taking the finance internally. I'm just not clear. Is the client a company? And the directors of the company have changed? I think that's what the question is saying, that the directors of the company have changed. In effect, the company is going into new ownership. Do I have to do my CDD now?
Yes, a company.
Yes, a company. Okay. Thanks, Caroline. Do I have to do the CDD now if I'm going to get sacked effectively as the accountant in a couple of weeks? I think I would wait and see.
It just depends on the attitude that you want to take to it, really. Like, do you want to spend the time doing that and then, not have that work with them anymore? Or like leave it, and then kind of when you hand everything back over, I will have to do the May bookkeeping, but not sure after that. Yeah, I'd say it's up to you, really. Like I personally would do it so that like I can hand everything over and be like, you're golden, but you need to keep an eye on this, or you either hand it over and be like, hey, just by the way, this is something that you need to look after, and then it's kind of, I don't mean to be rude, but then it's kind of like a sink or swim for them, and it's like they're like, what's AML, and you're like, peace be with you, good luck. Like, I suppose it depends.
I mean, I don't know. It's definitely one for you, Caroline, to decide how you want to play this. But one way of doing it would be to get into that discussion with them and saying, look, you want me to do the May bookkeeping. I'm absolutely fine to carry on working with you, the new owners. That'd be great. But I need to do CDD, and I need to, so I just want to be sure that you do want to keep me working for the firm for the foreseeable future. And they may say, no, go away, don't be silly. And if they do, you might say, well, in that case, I don't want to do the May bookkeeping.
Yeah.
Because
basically she wouldn't be under any legal obligation or like accounting obligation if she wasn't to do it. Like there wouldn't be any blowback.
Not legally. If she said, right, we're done, goodbye, finish. If she does the May bookkeeping and doesn't do the CDD, then technically she's in the wrong. So yeah, she maybe can use this as an opportunity to have that discussion with the new owners.
Yeah. Okay, cool, perfect. I am going to bring up the Russian connection, the Russian connection. But the answer is run, basically. No, it's not. Like, yeah, it's not run. But basically, I suppose in the summary of this is kind of dealing with any client that has any Russian connection, whether or not maybe they were born in the UK but have connections with a Russian company, or have Russian family, or Russian wealth. It's more, sorry, Carolyn, it's more, I am doing the May bookkeeping now for a director. I haven't done CDD on, think I will do this. Yeah, I think I.
Yeah, okay, Caroline, yeah, fine.
It shouldn't take that long,
right.
Honestly.
The Russian connection, I mean, obviously we're concerned here about sanctions.
Yes.
And this is like a hot potato thing.
Because we don't want to say something and then it be, because it's very legality.
I mean, yes, looking at it, parents are from Russia, previously lived in Russia. So presumably the client is actually UK based. So that you're not doing work for a Russian business, because you shouldn't be doing work for a Russian business because of sanctions. So what you're saying is, yeah, Russian connections, person based in the UK. I'm, of course, immediately thinking source of wealth. We don't want to see funds coming from Russia being invested in a UK business because of the whole sanctions thing.
Question, actually, so I don't mean to interrupt. If, say, I'm Sophie and my parents live in Russia, which they don't, just to disclose, and say they were to give me an inheritance and it's transferred to me from Russia to a UK bank account, and I was to use that money to invest in a business or like to buy a house or to buy an asset, is that a breach of the sanctions?
I'm going to give you the politician's answer and say, thank you for that wonderful question. Talk about something else. Yeah, short answer is I don't know. I think you would have to, if you're Sophie's accountant, you would have to maybe talk to a lawyer who knows about the sanctions law and say, are we okay here, or do we have a problem? The problem might arise before you get to there, though, because if the client's parents have Russian bank accounts and they're trying to transfer money from Russian bank accounts to UK bank accounts, I think at that point there's going to be some hoops to jump through at the very least. So maybe the problem won't arise. Hope so.
So it kind of sounds like just checking, in addition to advanced searches, asking all the questions, biometric checks, address verification, electoral roll, etc. Really digging into that source of wealth will be really critical, just to round off that enhanced due diligence.
And of course, the sanctions check, which Emma's already mentioned, is a key part of it. Yeah.
So just really ensuring that there's not Russian money flowing through that individual into
and documenting.
Yeah. Is this something that you would have in your risk assessment, like what line that you draw when it comes to your involvement with someone?
You are going to have in a risk assessment a question along the lines of, is this person subject to sanctions? To which ordinarily you just fly past, wouldn't you?
Yes.
No, next. But in this case, yes, you've got to engage brain and actually think about it.
Engage brain, like you're powering up.
Yes. Okay. Switch on my brain and think, oh, right. But I mean, clearly Emily has indeed switched on her brain.
Yeah, well, she's here.
Perceived as a potential issue, and wants a bit of help with it. Yeah.
It sounds like source of wealth. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. I am a registered accountant, but I don't provide accountancy services. I work with founders and CEOs advising on their finance setup like a fractional CFO. Very cool. Very impressive as well. But Hamish, when he was here, he was like 10 years ago, I was talking about people needing to do this more. So it's great to have someone who's doing it. Because of this, because of not offering accountancy services, but being an accountant, does this individual need to do AML?
Right. Okay. If we're talking terminology, you're saying that you're not providing accountancy services. And I think what you mean is, I don't do accounts, I don't do tax returns, I don't do all that stuff that accountants do. I just help people with their business and with their money. And some years ago, I had a conversation with ICAEW, because I'm a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. And I said to them, hey guys, I'm not an accountant, because I don't do accounts, and I don't do bookkeeping, and I don't do payroll, and I don't do audit, and I don't do tax returns. All I do is reports for Crown Court where people are up in trouble with the criminal law. So I'm not an accountant, so I don't need to do AML, do I? And the very nice lady at ICAEW I was talking to gave me an answer along the lines of, go away and don't be silly. She said, David, the reason that you're in court is because you're a forensic accountant, expert witness. Accountant. Yeah, you're an accountant. Okay, you don't do that accountancy stuff, but you review financial information, and that is accountancy work as far as AML is concerned. So yes, you have to do that. So the same is true with fractional CFOs and people like that who help businesses. It depends. If they are employed by that business, PAYE employee, then they're not in practice. And so they are not subject to the AML regime, and they don't need a practicing certificate. If they are self-employed or employed through their own personal service company, then they are effectively, well, they're certainly subject to the AML regime. They have to register for AML supervision. I had at one time thought in my innocence that there was a clear distinction between there's accountants who need practicing certificates and are subject to AML, and there's accountants who don't need practicing certificates and are not subject to AML. And I thought it's that simple. And actually it's not. there are some accountants who do not require a practicing certificate from their professional body, but are nevertheless subject to AML. And they either have to get AML supervision from their professional body or from HMRC. So it's actually not quite as clear cut as you would think, particularly ACCA. With the ACCA, you can do a certain amount of accountancy work without needing a practicing certificate, but you still have to register for AML supervision. So let me look. I always get to a point where I've witted on for ages, and I wonder if I've actually answered the question.
I suppose it's the summary of, like, would it be, if you're registered with an accountancy body, then you'll likely need to undertake AML processes on the people that you deal with, regardless of whether or not it's this clean cut of looking after someone's books or offering those accountancy services. Would that be a clear cut line?
If you need a practicing certificate for what you're doing, then you also need supervision for AML. But there will be some people who don't need a practicing certificate, but who nevertheless are subject to AML. And in this area of like fractional CFOs, and sometimes you get to that. And some of these people, for example, might be members of the CIMA, the management accountancy body. And so they would have their supervision through that. I see at the end of the question is, should I just leave my professional body? And my answer to that generally is no, don't leave your professional body, because HMRC are worse to deal with. One of the issues with HMRC is people are popping up and saying, thinking about it, now I've listened to David Winch on that podcast, I find that I should be registered for AML, and actually I should have been registered like 4 or 5 years ago, because I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years and I just didn't realize I had to be registered. So if you go to HMRC and say that, they will lick their lips, because they have a penalty regime for late registration. And step one is they work out the penalty based on £5,000. But that's not £5,000 for being late. It's £5,000 per 3-month period for however many periods you're late. So I was talking to somebody who was like 2.5 years late registering, and HMRC came along and basically said, right, so that's a penalty of, let's see, that's 10 quarters, that's £50,000 penalty. And they said, but hang on, we have a higher rate of penalty where it's over a year, so it's an extra £2,000. So that's a £52,000 penalty. That's our first computation. You don't want to go there. You really don't. They then reduced it because of voluntary notification, and they reduced it further for quick payment, and they reduce it also depending on the turnover of the business, and so on and so on. But basically, HMRC are not a soft touch when it comes to penalties. So don't leave your professional body thinking that HMRC will just love to have, well, they will love to have you, they'll love to have your money as well. So stick with the professional body would be my advice. Right. Sorry.
Totally. I was going to say something, but it's flying out my brain.
There's a lovely question about law firms.
Do you want to ask yourself the question? I can read it out. It's all right.
Sophie, you just leave. You just go, and I'll just talk to myself.
I'm just here to facilitate you. I'm just here to, just provide the funny accent. Okay, how best to do checks on law firms where there may be no control, and I added a / we thought that the no control element meant PSC, where a law firm that has no PSC.
Yes, what I am thinking here is that by no control, what the person means is, like, if you've got a solicitor's firm with, say, 10 partners, each of which has 10% of the business, then there's no beneficial owner for MLR terms. And so how do you do your CDD and your so on? Well, the answer is it's dead easy, certainly in England and Wales, because solicitors are all registered with the Solicitors Regulation Authority and with the Law Society, and there are online databases of solicitors. So you can immediately look up the solicitor online, look up the firm, look up the individual solicitor and say, yes, 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 they exist. The Law Society is happy that guy really is called John Smith and is a solicitor in Warrington. Fine, done. And then you don't need to ask him for his utility bills and his passport and all that stuff.
Oh, really?
Says David Winch. I mean, your supervisory body might come and say, no, you don't mind. But yeah.
Okay.
So when I'm dealing with solicitors, I just do those checks. I don't ask them for their like shoe size and inside leg measurement and things like that.
Of their face. Okay, that's really fascinating.
Moving on from that.
I was like, what great news.
When I'm instructed by a solicitor, I'm usually instructed by a solicitor on behalf of their client. And there I would take their client as effectively the beneficial owner, if you like. So I have to do CDD on their client as well. Now, in my case, that's dead easy because my clients are all criminal cases. So there's generally a police check done, which tells me their ID, their past criminal history, everything more than I want to know about them. And I can just stick a copy of that in my AML folder and jobs are good and it's done. So solicitors are dead easy. But there's another part to this question. What additional due diligence do I need to make for a high-risk client?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's a very fair question. And the answer is, well, it depends what the risk is. Way back years ago, when the MLR first came in, 20 years ago, when the MLR first came in for accountants, trainers were sort of saying, right, if it's high risk, you need to ask for an additional identity document. You need a passport and a driving license and a utility bill. Well, that's only the case if the risk is that the guy who tells you he's John Smith actually is not John Smith. And that's not usually the risk. The risk is usually more to do with this guy's got a cash-intensive business, for example, or he's got a lot of wealth. He's a high net worth individual. And so you address that risk. If it's a cash intensive business, then you're thinking about, right, what accounting records does he keep? Is there something like a balanced cash book, some sort of control of cash? What accounting work do we as a firm do on those cash records? And does that address the risk that's inherent in it being a cash intensive business? Hopefully the answer is yes. Document it, and then you've got it. So the question of what additional checks do I do relates straight back to what is the risk that you're trying to address.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Thank you, Ian. So Ian's just kind of
giving us the lowdown on what is meant by accountancy. Yeah.
So, actually, Ian, if you're going to be at the SEMA conference in Birmingham, come and introduce yourself and I'll chuck a heap of merch at you because Firmcheck will be there. Honestly, it's like no one came up at Accountex. I don't know because I was just floating around for the whole day. But anybody that's here and sees us in person at events, come up and be like, I got your AMAs because I will give you everything I own. It's like merch. But come and introduce yourself. Thanks for dropping that there, Ian. We've got two more questions. Yep. One more that was pre-submitted, and then this one from Angie, which I will bring up now. Angie said she is dealing with a charity with 8 trustees and struggling to establish with our governing body exactly who we need to be CDDing. That is really frustrating. Should we be obtaining all of it or just who we know has access to bank accounts, etc.?
Okay. Short answer is, unfortunately, you need to check with your supervisory body what they expect you to do.
Yeah.
Because some supervisory bodies would say, do your CDD on like the chairman or the chief executive or whatever he might be called, the head honcho, if you like, and also the treasurer, and also, if it's different, the person you usually deal with in the charity. Some supervisory bodies would say, oh, no, you've got to do the CDD on all the trustees. Somebody said to me, we've got a charity that's got 254 trustees. What do we do? My answer was along the lines of stick your head in a bucket. You know, it's horrendous to think of doing CDD on 254 people. Charities, I have to say, from an AML point of view, are potentially risky for two reasons. One is because there's often not a great control over receipts. If you've got a charity that involves, you know, shaking buckets outside supermarkets and stuff, then there's a question as to how do you ensure that all the donations to the charity actually get to the charity. Another problem with charities potentially is that they can be used as a tax dodge, and so they can be abused, if you like. So that again can be a problem. And again, sometimes with charities, there can be a lack of control of charitable expenditure. And so you can have somebody maybe who's volunteering for the charity who's also nicking some of the funds and so on. So, you know, all these things can be problems with charities. That has nothing to do, of course, with IDing the trustees. But it does have to do with your risk assessment, your AML risk assessment of what you think the money laundering risks are associated with that client. And again, documented. Yeah. I mentioned documenting it.
Always and forever.
Always and forever.
There was a follow-up clarification. Carolyn's also dealing with a charity. So she said she's done CDD on all trustees, although only one can access the bank, but it also sounds like office staff can access the bank, but she's not done CDD on them. Does she need to?
No.
Okay. Cool. Great. Oh,
that was a short answer, wasn't it? I thought try and get one short answer in, David.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, yeah, no, charities, yeah, they would be high risk because you've got all this random amount of money coming in and then being spent. Yeah. And I suppose it is, I can understand because on the Firmcheck side, we are trying to work with accounting bodies ourselves. Like obviously we're delivering education. And so I want to make sure that what we say is correct for how they want their business done and for their members. So it is often hard to find the right person to speak to. But I'd also say there's never just dependent on time, there's never such thing as too much AML. The thing is work, but you couldn't overdo it, but you can underdo it. Would that be a sentiment to take, or am I just creating?
Yeah, but also you don't really want to cheese off your clients. By forever going to them and nitpicking about, you know, can I have your driving license and oh, your driving license is expired, can I have a copy of your new one? And also if you're in practice, you're actually there to earn fees and make some money, and most people will not charge for this sort of work, so it's dead time. So whilst I'm not trying to knock you down, Sophie, in terms of there's never too much CDD, but you know, there is a balance to be struck.
Yeah, you've got to earn money, right? And I suppose the same, not in this situation necessarily, provide one which is ID that's 3 to 4 years old, or 3 or 4 year old individuals. I suppose I was going to say, you pay fees to your accounting body, right? And you pay fees to your software providers. It's the same as your clients to you. You can ask more from these people that you're giving money to, especially software providers, and actually share your opinions on what you want and I'm just trying to encourage everybody to be a little bit more vocal about that. Like, say for Firmcheck, we hear, I want you to integrate with client engagers, a really common one at the moment. And we go, okay, cool, great. But when we go to client engager's like, no one's told us that. And I'm like, I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
You guys, who you give money to, you're giving the power to. And so then you need to ask more of these people, but ask them in an email. Don't just say it, send an email, because when people send me emails asking for stuff on the education side, more so, then I can actually go to the people that sit above me and be like, this person sent this email. It's not just me making stuff up. And it's the same for your accountancy body and the software providers, people that you give money to. Ask more of them, please. So that's just my little rant. It's just, you can tell I'm like, please.
And I know Firmcheck are interested to hear from people what they want on the software.
On the software, but also on the education side, like there's some crazy stuff coming along the pipeline for August. It's mental. Everyone here will get an early access invitation, because obviously everyone here's my favorite, but that's been able to get off the ground because of people sitting here and engaging, like Emily and Carolyn. Where you give your time and money. Yeah. So I'm also trying to empower you to ask more of your accountancy body to get in their face a little bit more.
There's a question you haven't addressed, and
the pre-one
left. I pre-submitted one about electronic AML checks.
Yes. Which electronic AML providers will do CDD identity checks in substitution for certification of the ID documents?
Now, electronic checks are getting more and more sophisticated all the time.
Yes.
And the hot new thing is biometric checks. Yeah. And I happen to believe that Firmcheck does offer biometric checks. Am I right there?
Yes, you are, David. That's
so Firmcheck is totally on the ball there. But one of the things that, again, mentioned in the question, electronic CDD identity checks in substitution for certification of ID documents. And again, we come back to your AML supervisory body, because some of them will say, yeah, you've done an electronic check on David Winch. You've even done a biometric check on David Winch. He really is David Winch. We've checked his financial history, and he seems to have a bank account at that address that you believe. He seems to have a leased car, a credit card. He's on the electoral roll. All sorts of stuff demonstrates that David Winch really does exist, and he lives at the address that you've got there. Some supervisory bodies will say, that's fine, you're done. Some will say, that's great, but have you seen his passport, or have you seen a driving license, or have you seen a bill? Because they will say, we would like you to get that as well. So what I'm saying is you have to check with your supervisory body what they think. But yeah, I'm dead keen on electronic checks.
Yeah.
And they cover sanctions and all sorts of stuff as well, which brings us back to Emily's question. So,
and with Firmcheck as well, like the £5.50 per check. I don't like selling, but I'll tell you that. But people go, why are you charging me for that? Or why is it that much? The benefit of it is in you're sending that responsibility to the client for them to send you that documentation through that portal, so that you're not having to go send me a photocopy and then getting that in an email, and then you're uploading that into a software or into your spreadsheets. It takes that whole journey out of it, and then the onus on the client to be doing that. So,
and does it pull data from company's house as well, and that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, Firmcheck does. So yeah, it's got into the company's house. Free people.
Shall we give Firmcheck a bit of a plug, seeing as
no, it sells itself. It's fine. Well, no, thank you so much again, David. This is our third month for doing them.
Shall we do one next month?
Maybe. Do you reckon?
Yeah, why not? Why
You
not?
reckon people like us? I think so.
Yeah,
I like
we
hanging
need
out with
more
you.
coffee. We need more relax. I've seen worse mug
Yeah. No,
coffees.
even if it's just you and I just having a yarn each month, like so I'm just like, I'll just give it to everybody. So on that note, I don't have a support team today. I can share that. Look,
Hey,
I'm
well
like
done
a
you.
director and a producer and a host. So if you'd like to join us next month, you can register there.
Tell me again what AMA stands for, because I keep forgetting.
Ask me anything.
Ask me anything.
Ask me anything AML related. I'm not going to talk to you about what you should have for dinner. And then if you want to keep in touch with David as well, hopefully this doesn't take it away. There you go. You can follow David on LinkedIn. Technology is crazy. So do you know if you're speaking at Accountex North yet, David?
I don't know. No, I think it went okay at Accountex London. I did do Accountex North last year, and so hopefully, if anybody from Accountex is listening, send me an invite. I will.
Nice. Yeah,
I would team up and do Accountex North.
I'd be down to do a panel coffee session with you, David.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's provide Accountex. Let's suggest Accountex invite the pair of us.
Let's go talk to Carolyn Hobden. And if you want to learn more about Firmcheck, I'm getting trigger happy here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pushing all the buttons. You can click and have a look there. Look at the software, or don't. You're welcome just to hang out here. But yeah, follow David on LinkedIn. Follow Firmcheck on LinkedIn. But we'll be doing this first Tuesday of the month next month as well. We'll be at SEMA conference in next month. And we'll be at Accountex North. It will be Firmcheck's 1-year birthday. So there's some surprises there. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Doesn't feel like we've been around for a year. It feels like a lifetime. But no, thank you everyone for attending, and thanks David again for your time, and looking forward to seeing you all next month.
Brilliant. Okay, see you next month.
See you next month. Bye.